Now on the Georgia Vote, 2 weeks to go in the race for the White House as both campaigns battle for the state's 16 electoral votes. We're tracking Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in the home stretch.
Also,
I think President Trump's going to win by such a margin that we won't be in court.
we continue our sit-downs with the insiders. This week, what state GOP chair Josh McCoon thinks it will take the former president Donald Trump to win a second four-year term.
And this morning, Democratic strategist Paul Sabak and Republican strategist Deanna Harris sit down for our Politics Roundtable.
All right now on the Georgia Vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Well, the Georgia Vote is certainly underway. All across the state, early voters are out casting their ballots.
And with only about 2 weeks to go to Election Day, the presidential candidates are making their final pushes in one last effort to tip what is expected to be a razor-close election.
And it's a weekend visit to Metro Atlanta for Vice President Kamala Harris with a Get Out the Vote rally in Atlanta yesterday and services at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Stonecrest today. The latest polls for Georgia show the VP anywhere from even with former President Donald Trump to being down by as much as 7 points. Harris, though, is working hard to get her message out.
There are people here in Georgia still dealing with the devastation from Hurricane Helene. As we know, this recovery will take time, and we will stand with Georgia and everyone across the Southeast who are impacted by these recent storms for as long as it takes to rebuild. Let's continue to energize. Let's continue to organize. Let's continue to mobilize. And let's remind folks that your vote is your voice, and your voice is your power. And so, Georgia, I ask you, are you ready to make your voices heard?
And it won't be long before Vice President Harris is back. On Thursday, she is expected to return to Georgia with former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. The week began with former President Trump making a campaign double dip in the state. First, he took part in a town hall for Fox News in Cumming, and then he spoke to a crowd in Cobb County. He opened with a salute to those in the state hit hard by Hurricane Helene.
Our hearts are with the families of every citizen who is tragically lost, and all of the people who lost their home. A lot of homes were lost, too. A lot of people were lost. The citizens of Georgia are tough and resilient, and this state is going to come back stronger than ever. We're going to make sure it comes back stronger than ever. The people of Georgia are going to end Kamala Harris's reign of failure. And we are going to launch a new golden age of American success for the citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed.
Former President Donald Trump was also scheduled for an event in Savannah hosted by the NRA, but that is now canceled. The former president is still planning to head to Gas South Arena in Duluth on Wednesday for another event.
And it is not just the top of the tickets hitting Georgia this week. Plenty of others tied to the campaigns are making their way here. Former President Trump, of course, was in Cumming and Cobb County on Tuesday, and Vice President Harris was in Atlanta on Saturday. But add to that a few other key surrogates. Former President Bill Clinton was in Columbus on Monday. Gwen Walz, Governor Tim Walz's wife, stumping for her husband Wednesday in Smyrna. And second gentleman Doug Emhoff appearing Thursday for VP Harris in Savannah. In a campaign season that has seen eye-popping fundraising, the one resource that remains limited is the candidates' time. They will be spending it in the states they think will decide this election. And right now, they are saying loud and clear that one of those states is Georgia.
And the campaign visits in Georgia come with the added push to win over those going to the polls ahead of November 5th. Early voting began on Tuesday, and it came with a record turnout right out of the gate. The Secretary of State's office logged more than 310,000 people casting their votes on Tuesday. That is nearly double what we saw on the first day of early voting in Georgia for the 2020 presidential election. And Friday afternoon, the Secretary of State's office confirmed more than 1 million votes were cast. Early voting in Georgia ends on Friday, November 1st. And you can count former President Jimmy Carter among those who voted early this election. The Carter Center confirming the 100-year-old voted by mail. His grandson, Jason Carter, previously said the former president intended to vote for Kamala Harris. Well, the bulk of attention in a presidential year is always on the top of the ticket as voters choose who they want to send to the White House. And they have a big choice to make this year. But in many down-ballot races in the general election, those choices disappear.
For these state legislative contests, some of them, it's the Democrat who has no opposition, and others the Republican who has no opposition.
Regardless of party, UGA political science professor Charles Bullock says it happens a lot in Georgia politics.
There have been some years where Georgia has had more uncontested state legislative contests than any other state in the nation.
This year, according to an 11 Alive News analysis of Georgia Secretary of State's office data, out of all of the candidates who qualified for state house, state senate, and district attorney in the general election, roughly 40% are unopposed.
Is that surprising to you?
It's not surprising.
Democratic strategist Howard Franklin says gerrymandered districts crafted every 10 years by the party in power are designed to limit the number of competitive legislative contests.
There are really two questions you have to ask yourself. Can you put someone in that race, and do you have a chance at winning it?
In districts where the population skews heavily towards one party, political strategist and former Republican staffer Spiro Amburn says the real competition often occurs in the primary.
Particularly in state house and state senate races where the districts are heavily Republican or heavily Democrat. That's exactly right. That's where the real battles are taking place.
But more competitive races could be coming. Redistricting happens every 10 years, and Professor Bullock says as time passes, districts change.
You draw your districts at the beginning of the decade, and you try to look over the hill and around the corner and figure out what's going to happen in the next 10 years so that this district is going to continue to be safe for your party, but it's hard to anticipate the future.
Well, another big part of this voting season is the state election board. And this week, we saw more legal rulings by Fulton County judges striking down some of the board's recently passed rules. Late Wednesday, Judge Thomas Cox declared 7 new election rules were illegal, unconstitutional, and void. 3 of those rules received much attention. 1 requires the hand counting of the number of ballots cast, and 2 had to do with the certification of election results. National and state Republicans appealed the ruling. The big question now is whether an appellate court will take up the case and the issue its on decision before Election Day. Still ahead, we'll take a deep dive into the Republican strategy for victory in 2 weeks with State Party Chair Josh McCoon.
And later, this week's Voice of the Voter has a nose for the right flowers, but today he is sharing what he senses about this year's presidential campaigns. All ahead next on the Georgia Vote.
In just 16 days, we will find out just how much influence Georgia has in deciding the 47th president of the United States. And for the state's political insiders, they are working behind the scenes with the national campaigns. For the next 2 weeks, we will dive into the strategy each side is implementing. And today, we talk with State GOP Chair Josh McCoon, and we start on the issue of early voting. When former President Trump came to Georgia during his rally in Cobb County, you even saw banners on the stage saying, vote early, and we're seeing this encouragement among the party. Why the change this year in that rhetoric to get people to go out and vote early when the candidate at the top of your ticket was critical in the past of early voting and mail-in voting, citing concerns that there could be fraudulent activity there?
Well, whether you would like to see a return to just having election day voting and some limited absentee voting, we have to live under the rules of the laws that we have here in Georgia. And I think the campaign has embraced that. And we certainly have at the Georgia Republican Party to understand if we want to win, we need to get our voters out early. When you get your voters out early, that makes it easier at the end when you're trying to move people on election day. You don't have as many people to go get. You don't have to worry about long lines discouraging people. You don't have to worry about bad weather or other things occurring that might depress turnout. So by banking that vote over the next 3 weeks, you're really able to do that. And President Trump has embraced that strategy. Certainly the Georgia Republican Party has. And I believe we're seeing it pay off now.
Are you concerned at all that those concerns from 2020 that resulted in these recounts and, quite frankly, chaos in Georgia is going to happen this year because of early voting, like the former president said it happened in 2020?
Well, I think the increase in early voting is actually going to result in a clear winner in this election. I think that President Trump is surging at the right time in polls. People are just now, even though people like me have been living and breathing this for months and months, people are just now sort of tuning in and making their decisions. And it looks like undecided voters are breaking the president's way. So if we're able to get those people to the polls, get them to vote, those voters that don't vote in every election, these low propensity voters, we get them to the polls, we get them to vote, I think President Trump's going to win by such a margin that we won't be in court. We won't be dealing with recounts. 2020 was the closest election of my lifetime, and I don't think that's going to be the case in 2024.
I want to bring it back to his rally here in Georgia, heavily focused on the economy, two big banners on the stage, no tax on tips. His running mate, Vice President Kamala Harris, attacked on her last 3.5 years in office, that she is not the change candidate. Why focus so much of his conversation on the economy here in Georgia? Is that what you're hearing from voters here? Yeah,
there's a lot of economic insecurity out there, right? I mean, for people that are living paycheck to paycheck, this economy has not been working for them. I do the grocery shopping in my household, so I get a weekly reminder of how expensive basic staples are, eggs, milk, beef. We've got to get the economy working again. And most people remember, it wasn't that long ago President Trump was in office, and they know what that economy was like in his administration.
Now, the Harris administration, or the Harris campaign rather, attributes this issue with the economy to the handling of the pandemic with the Trump administration. What is your response to that?
My response to that is, when you've been in office for 4 years, you own the economy. And this administration, this vice president, cast the tie-breaking vote on one of the most reckless spending bills I've ever seen. When you dump that much money in the economy, this is what you get. You get this crushing, crippling inflation. The average Georgian's paying $12,000 more a year for basic necessities. That's a tax. That's a tax that's been imposed by Vice President Harris. And so what I see voters saying are, we want something to be done about these prices. We want to be able to live. We've seen any kind of modest increase in wages totally eclipsed by how expensive it is to get the basic necessities you need to live. And I think that's why people are looking very closely at President Trump.
And this was just a portion of our conversation. We touched on a wide range of topics there with Josh McCune. You can watch our full interview online at 11alive.com. And next week on the Georgia Vote, we sit down with State Democratic Party leader, Congresswoman Nikema Williams. After the break, Val Sabak and Deanna Harris join us to break down this hectic final 2 weeks in the race for the White House and our Politics Roundtable. You're watching the Georgia Vote.
Welcome back. It is now time for our political roundtable. Today we have Val Sabak, former executive director of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, and Republican strategist Deanna Harris. Welcome to you both.
Welcome
we are
back.
In crunch time of this election right now.
Getting close.
Let's start here. I want each of you to answer this. Val, let's start with you. What is the key to victory for Vice President Harris in Georgia in these last couple weeks?
It is making sure that the base is turning out in Georgia. We saw that when the folks come through, the campaign folks come through and swing through Georgia, we win. We saw that in 2020. They need to continue to talk to voters, make sure that folks are getting out to vote, whether it's early vote or day of voting.
Deanna, how about on the Republican side? What is the path to victory here?
Well, I guess, all of those things compose the path of victory for any candidate. But for Republicans, it's more important for us to turn out early, which some of the numbers say that. We've been coming to early vote with these first couple of days more than ever. So that's kind of exciting for us, because usually Republicans are like election day voters. And so they're really pushing us to turn out early this season.
And I'm glad that you mentioned early voting, because I wanted to ask you all, what can we predict from these early votes? As of Friday, 1 million voters already in Georgia.
Right.
A record-breaking million voters, too.
Well, we've had a good turnout in Cobb County, pretty consistent over the past week. So Ideally, we would like for that to be a good portion of our supporters. That way, the candidate can be able to spend their money on more voters that aren't sure, right? So
more concentrated.
Yes. So if we can get our solid voters, our solid Republicans to turn out early, we can cut those numbers down on mailers and phone calls and text messages, and spend that money on people that could really help.
And those who have already voted don't have to get the text messages anymore.
That's correct.
And I think that's a good point to ask you, Fal. I think there's sort of two tracks when we talk about the early voting numbers. There are folks who look at it and want to prognosticate kind of as observers, and then there's internal political strategists who use those pieces of data for strategic elements. Is there value in looking at it and telling who may be up and who may be down in the race, or is it more for get out the vote, turnout effect?
It's more for, I think, get out the vote and turnout effect. Georgia is a very unique state where, I mean, we truly are a 50-50 state. Yeah. It is difficult to kind of look at those numbers and say, well, this person's ahead and this person's...
Even though some people on Twitter, they definitely want to do it.
Absolutely. And
Twitter analysts.
Yeah, that's right. But it is a little difficult when you dig into the data to kind of figure out 100%. Usually you can kind of see where it's trending, and then just like what Deanna was saying, that's how you then on the inside track go in and say, okay, now it's time for us to send a canvasser to this house, or make sure that we're touching them via phone, via text. It's hard to tell right now.
Can I ask you guys about Trump's visit? Deanna, I want to ask you, he visited Cobb County. He's expected to visit Gwinnett County. These are two counties we know that went blue in 2016. They stayed blue in 2020. What is the importance? Why is he deciding to campaign in these districts instead of maybe spending more of his time in a deep red district, garnering more support, or just getting people who he knows will vote for him to get out and actually vote for him?
Correct. So a lot different from 2020, where he did just visit those areas where deep red throughout Georgia and other states as well. Now's the time to pull over those voters who are soft Democrats or just kind of in the middle, who don't necessarily know exactly who they're going to vote for. They haven't quite looked at their ballot as of yet. So when you have these events, it gives them, especially because they're free, gives them an opportunity to come out and listen to them speak live and in person. Metro areas bring a lot more people, right? The lines are crazy in Cobb County to get in. And even when back in the summer when he had it downtown, the line was crazy and people were outside. I was kind of outside. I didn't get there in time, but it was loaded outside of folks. So you get to actually hear the former president speak, and that's really where he's looking to get that little tip over, that 1 or 2% of that can really change it for these, down the middle states like Georgia.
And Deanna, you mentioned that these events are free. You don't have to get up on advertising, get up on broadcast for this. There's a lot of money sloshing through both of these campaigns right now. We've got about 60 seconds left. Fal, I want to ask you, what really moves the needle at this point? Who is out there who is undecided and who is still persuadable after all this time with these candidates? And what do these campaigns need to do?
I think the campaigns, what they need to do is spend the final 2 weeks getting out to the voters, going to their doors, and articulating the path that they see the country moving forward and what is their vision for the country. I think, ramping up the voter contact is key right now. I think reaching those people who, may be kind of soft either way, they just got to get out in front of the voters.
It's a turnout game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
We would love to continue this conversation. We've got to turn right now, but we will have you both back, I am sure of it. But the show is not over, so stay with us, because after the break, we head to East Point as this flower shop owner shares if he thinks the race for the White House is still smelling like roses as he prepares to cast his ballot. Stay with us. The decisions you and other Georgia voters make in just 2 weeks in our critical battleground state will help decide who becomes the next president. And that is why we work each week to make sure your voices are at the center of the conversation. After all, you cannot have the Georgia vote without Georgia voters. This week's Voice of the Voter is Richard Ramey, who runs his own flower shop in East Point.
We are in beautiful East Point, Georgia at Flower Cottage. We've been part of this city for over 35 years.
Your work lets you see people in some of their best moments and also in some of their worst, some of their toughest moments.
1,000%. We're there in the happy times and the sad times. It's really special because you are there for people during some of the biggest times in their lives, whether it be the birth of a child or their wedding or, unfortunately, the passing of a loved one.
Does it make you appreciate life more?
Every day. My friends say I live life to the fullest every single day, and I do. This is the design room. This is where all the magic happens. We have saved many marriages with flowers, so we're very proud of that.
You said roses say love. It takes love to put it all together, too, doesn't it?
It takes a lot of love.
We've got a big election coming up. When you look ahead to it, what worries you?
Well, if I was to be truthful, that Donald Trump may get elected.
Why is that?
I just really don't think he's a kind person. Some people may not think the president needs to be kind, but I do. I vote for the person, not necessarily the party. I think he's very dangerous for our country. I think he's dangerous for democracy.
When you think about the election, what is the number one issue that's going to govern how you vote?
I think that, as most Americans do, I think I'm going to vote for the candidate that I feel that's right for me as a person, and a person that is a candidate is right for me as a business owner. As far as me being part of the LGBTQ plus community, that concern always comes up every 4 years for me. I've got to have a candidate that's going to support my right to be me.
That's the number one issue for you. Is there a second most important issue for you?
If every American at this moment don't have democracy on their brains or when they're thinking, I mean, it's so important right now. For me, it's not really hard to decide who should be our president. I mean, it might be for some people, and what's kind of scary for me is to think there's like probably 70 million people that thinks it's okay to have a felon as president. And I'm just not one of them. I'm sorry. I mean, but I tell you what I am for your freedom to choose who you want. That's what America is all about. This culture that's going on right now in the political world about how we have to hate one another or not be friends with somebody or disown family members, that's got to stop. I'm 60 years old. I've never been mad at someone for who they voted for. And that's part of being an American, to choose who you want.
We always end with this. What are you optimistic about?
I'm optimistic about that we can do all the things that I've been talking about. I'm optimistic that we come back together as a country and that we learn how to love thy neighbor and not to worry about the political sign in their front yard. I'm ready to go back to the way it used to be.
And, that's been one of the sort of unifying themes we've heard from so many Voice of the Voter guests, even from folks who have decided who they're going to vote for. That's been a theme for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, Zach, thank you so much for that conversation. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope to see you back here next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.